Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Morphy's with a World War II Soviet sword. It is forgotten weapons after all, not just forgotten firearms. I don't normally do blades, but every once in a while I come across a particularly interesting one that I think is worth touching on, and this is a good example of that. This is a 1927 pattern Soviet Cossack Shashka, cavalry sword, essentially, cavalry saber, essentially. And it is specifically one that was produced for the 1945 victory parade at the end of World War II. The Shashka is a fairly distinctive style of saber associated with the Cossacks. And the Russian military has had a formal military Shashka pattern ever since 1834. They went through a number of different iterations. One of the main ones was 1881. And then the next big one was 1927. So the Soviet Union, when it came into power, had a bit of a rocky relationship, shall we say, with ethnic Cossacks. They weren't necessarily treated very well, but they continued to be a key element in the Soviet military, providing a lot of the cavalry forces. Not exclusively cavalry, but largely cavalry forces for the Red Army. When World War II began, there was some split among ethnic Cossacks as to who they were going to fight for. Some did fight for the Germans, but the majority of them kind of took this attitude of, we may have objections to our government, but we're still not cool with someone just invading the country, and ended up fighting for the Soviets. And what a lot of them were equipped with were 1927 pattern Shashkas, in addition to firearms, of course. But this was a more common weapon issued during World War II than I think a lot of people might expect. So let's take a closer look at it. Let's start with the most distinctive element here, which is obviously the grip. Bird's head sort of style. There's no crossguard, there's no hand grip. It's just a blade with a handle on it. And this is distinctive of the Shashka. It is also a slightly curved blade. You saw that from back there, but a big fuller in the blade. It is single-edged. There's a little bit of a false edge up at the tip. This one, the 27 pattern, has a 32-inch blade that's 810 millimeters. Pretty typical. We have a wooden scabbard covered in leather. This one is in outstanding condition. On this one, the top hangers are made of brass, and the chape at the bottom is steel. That's typical of end of World War II. These were fairly decorative when they first started making them. They got simplified during the war, and then this 1945, this parade model version, is a little bit of a step back to a more decorative style. It's worth pointing out the hanger ring is on the underside here. These were actually carried with the edge facing up, which is a little bit unusual for swords, but that was the style at the time, as they say. There were several versions of these that were made. There was an officer's pattern, which was like this. It's just a sword. But there was also an infantry pattern made, and that actually had a couple of extra fittings on the scabbard, and it would hold your spike bayonet for your Mosin-Nagant, because, well, they didn't really issue scabbards for the bayonets. So if you had one of the infantry Shashkas, your bayonet was stowed right there. Unfortunately, I don't have an example of one of those here to show you. However, in 1944, they stopped putting those bayonet fittings on the scabbards because, frankly, guys weren't using bayonets anymore. By that point, the standard arms for Red Army infantry were no longer the M1927. They were M38 and M44 carbines, which had either no bayonets or fixed folding bayonets, or submachine guns that also had no bayonets. So this parade model would never have had, there was no version of the late war model with bayonet attachments. Looking up close here a bit, we have two inspection proofs on the blade and on the handle here. These are standard 45, 46, 1945 and 46 inspection marks. And on the other side, we have a 1945 date on the blade and IMZ in Cyrillic stamped here. That's the name of the factory. These late war ones were produced by, well, I'll spell it out down there, basically the Metal Tools factory. And then the hilt here goes back to the decorative pattern that was used during the 1930s. It is marked, well, CCCP or USSR there. We've got a star, we've got a hammer and sickle, we've got some decorative, traditional sort of decorative elements there. They went back to this for the parade, the victory parade. But 1942, this sort of standard style of hilt that had been used was simplified to just brass with a big star on it. Everything got simplified. Well, everything, including war material and everything else, got simplified in the Soviet Union about 1942, when the German invasion was at its peak and things were really quite tough. The center of the handle here is birch, textured wood. It's pretty cool. Like, it's a pretty cool overall design, a bit distinctive from what you would find as issued officer swords in most of the rest of the world, certainly the rest of Europe. And these guys were manufactured from 1927 through 1946. They were issued throughout the war. I think a lot of people don't expect that bladed weapons got much use outside of, say, Japan, but they did. There were many divisions of Cossacks. There were many, many thousands of these swords manufactured and issued all the way through World War II. For someone who's interested in this specific field, there's of course a lot of variation in historical military shashkas throughout Russia, and even just within the 1927 Soviet pattern. The pre-war ones, the wartime simplifications, and then you get ones like this. Let's go back to a little bit higher of a decorative standard for celebrating the end of World War II, or the Great Patriotic War, as it's known in Russia. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks to Morpheus for giving me access to this one to film for you. Thanks for watching.